Welcome to Actions and Limits. My name is Justin Atherton. I'm the Peak Performance Consultant for Confidence Unchained. With me as always is Paul Fortune. Paul is a mindset coach and the founder of A Call to Action. And together, we make Actions and Limits. Welcome to the show, the podcast where we talk about the actions we can take and the limits we create. Another great week, Paul. I'm glad for our guests to come out today. For everyone out there, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Subscribe on YouTube or follow on your favorite podcast platform. And also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Actions and Limits so you're staying updated on our upcoming content. Paul, I'm really excited for our guest. I know you were on her podcast recently. Gunjani Patel. She's sounds like she's got a lot of great information to share. So I'm excited to bring her out here in a minute.
Absolutely. Like you said, I was on her podcast. A lot of great energy. I think our audience is going to respond very positive to our message. It's going to be a good episode. But I want to talk about your summit. What is going on with your summit, Justin? Because it's coming up in a couple weeks, man.
Yeah, just about a week and a half. So it's coming out. Super excited for the lineup. I know you're going to be one of the guests. You know, you like to hop on all these. I'm like, come on, Paul. You can hop on mine too. So I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be amazing. The lineup we have. A lot of great speakers from all different walks of life. So really excited to have that out there. So that'll be happening here in about a week and a half. So
how can people participate or listen to it?
Yeah. We'll put the links down in the bio here and so they can click on it and see the list of guests. So we'll make sure to put that down in our Instagram, our Facebook. We'll put it out there for everybody to get a hold of that. So, but I know you want to talk a little bit about limiting beliefs. I know this is something you said you talked with Gunjani a little bit about in her podcast. So in what aspect? Because I know we've talked about this before a little bit.
Well, I think that comes up a lot in our conversations is limited belief. And I can't say this enough, Justin, but I like your little hook that you do for yourself where you actually name your negative voice in your head that's giving you these negative feedback. You know, Fred.
Yeah, Fred.
And I think that I'm a proponent when I do my coaching and I get coached. I go off the what it's called. It's called the acronym KISS. Keep it simple, stupid.
There you go.
And I feel like that resonates. And I think that it's a simple thing, that people can relate to. You're naming this voice in your head, this negative voice, Fred. And I just think that goes so far because it's so easy to do and then to recognize it.
Yeah, it's interesting though when I do share it with people. I was on a podcast the other day and I shared that, and the host was a little taken back by it. He's like, "You name the voice in your head?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's how you separate yourself from your thoughts, because we have this tendency of believing that every thought that comes across our head, like that's who we are. And that's just not reality, because there's so many fleeting thoughts that we have on all times of the day, and just the random ones we grab onto and go, oh, I guess I'll use this one, or this one's the loudest of the thoughts that is popping up in your head. But just that little tweak to be able to name it and go, oh, I see what's going on here. That's not me. Whatever you want to name that for yourself. I name him Fred. I don't know anybody named Fred. It works out easy for me. So
yabba dabba doo.
Well, now I got a face to him. Great. Now I'm going to picture a cartoon Fred talking. But in whatever it is, whether I'm in the gym, whether I'm working on a project and I'm starting to get worn down and tired, and you hear those thoughts chiming in, it's a way to distance myself from that internal voice, from that limiting belief, and go, oh, no, that's not me. That's something else in me trying to keep me safe, trying to keep me comfortable, trying to keep me in my little safe bubble. And I'm like, no, Fred, you can go sit in the corner and watch me finish my project. And I almost get that extra little boost. But yeah, it is a real simple thing. But I think sometimes it kind of, it shocks people just a little bit just because it's not the normal thing to name the voice in your head, I guess.
I love it. I actually love it, and I may steal that with with some of my client calls, because I really think it's a great thing. I mean, you just got to embrace it, right? I mean, it's not. I don't know if the ghost thought like it was a crazy factor, but it's not.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think it's a real simple thing to implement, and I think a lot of people can relate to it. Like for me, when I start to have negative thoughts, I go, there's two big reasons why I start to have negative thoughts. One is I'm hungry, and two is I'm sleepy.
Those are two big factors.
Yeah. So if I start to go negative, I go, am I hungry? Am I sleepy? Well, and then I'll fix the problem. I'll make myself a snack or take a nap.
Yeah.
Maybe not be able to take a nap, but
I wish I could take more naps. I need to plan in some more naps, but yeah. So I'm sure we'll touch on some of that, those limiting beliefs. I think Gunjani is going to have some insight into that as well. So let's go ahead and let's bring her out. So Gunjani is a licensed mental health counselor, life and wellness coach, speaker, a writer, and now a podcast host of Traumatic Transformations. She runs a private practice called gpatel Counseling in San Diego, California, and Florida, and specializes in depression, anxiety, PTSD, and trauma. She is also a new mom to a 22-month-old, hyper energetic, but a very lovely boy, and is now in the process of relaunching herself after being on hiatus for the last few years. Her newfound vision in life is to spread mental health awareness and normalize it, to break the stigma associated with help seeking. So let's go ahead and bring out Gunjani Patel. Gunjani, welcome to the show. We're so glad to have you here on the Actions and Limits podcast. So thank you for joining us.
It's truly my pleasure. Thank you for having me, guys. Really excited to be on the show.
Yeah, we're super excited to pick your brain. I know your bio is very impressive. You've got a lot of things going on, being, a licensed mental health counselor and wellness coach and all different sorts of things. Like, how did this start for you? Like, how did you go down this path?
So how many minutes do I have? I like to check on that.
You got all the time. As long as you're entertaining, go for it.
So I'll try to make it concise, but yet meaningful to your audience, because I know, with Paul being on my show and your audience, so my journey, right now, my part-time job, because I'm also a new mother to a 25-year-old. I started sort of late in life in terms of the whole motherhood thing. Normally people do that stuff in 20s. I just decided to do that in my late 30s because I wanted to be with the right person before I had a child. Sure. And, I do mental health. Like, I'm a licensed mental health therapist. I am a trauma specialist. I specialize in depression, anxiety, trauma, PTSD, so to speak, to be specific, grief, loss, and addictions. So very hardcore stuff in my everyday life. But just to take you back and give you a context of how all of that madness began. So I started when I was younger, growing up. I grew up in India. My parents still live there. So I've almost lived in India and US almost half and half at this point. I've been everywhere in US ever since I was 18. I came here for my undergrad. So as a child, and growing up in a South Asian community, I don't know if you're used to this, the running joke that we have that, it's like if you're Indian, you're either an engineer or you're a doctor. So growing up as a child, automatically, I just wanted to become a doctor or a surgeon. Normally boys become engineer and girls tend to become doctors or engineers. Now it's changing, but mostly doctors. So I grew up in this family which was very entrepreneurial and, very into education and stuff. So I was like, oh, okay. So education was always a big deal. Then, like, my childhood was for the most part great, but everything started to sort of, go downhill between my mid-teens and mid-20s, which is what normally I find that happens with people. So, in my mid 20s, I mean, in my early teens, I went through some sexual trauma in my life. And I guess that was something that we didn't discuss. My family was never into mental health. And it was a big sort of thing. I was in boarding school, and that was a big change because I was living away from family, that kind of stuff. Then, right after I came back, there was another incident happened where I, got another traumatic thing happen in my life, which was a third-degree burn. And in Indian culture, it's like, back then my mother used to show me boys. There was a whole arranged marriage concept. So she would be like, oh, at 19, she'd be like, you like this boy? You like this boy? I'm like, Mom. So then by then I had come to America, but I was like, I'm 19. And I was like, oh, newly come to America for undergrad. And I just wanted to date. I didn't even know that I wanted to, I knew I didn't want to be married just yet, but the whole burn thing, I was just like, oh my God, now who's going to want to marry me? And, the teen years was just super rough. But then, I had an opportunity to come to America. So I was like, okay. So long story short, I ended up picking nutrition science because I wanted to I bombed my real important exams before it was like one of the most important exams that's telling the way the Indian education system is designed. It's very telling whether you'll go into science, which is where, you get to pick doctor or engineer or all of those science related fields. And then you have arts, which is like the grades, if you had the worst grades, you go into arts. And then there's business administration, which is commerce, and you go into business. Well, my grades, because of all those things that were happening in my teen, I was like almost arts. And I'm like, that's not what I wanted. It was just such a bummer. And I'm just like, okay, now what am I going to do? So I ended up picking nutrition science because I still wanted to do something hospital related and I wanted to help people. So I was like, okay, at least, that'll kind of get me in the whole mode of helping people and doing stuff in the hospital arena. So I was like, okay. So then I came home. I came to America. I had an opportunity. My parents were like, I used to have a cousin who used to live in Ohio, Cincinnati back then. And they were like, University of Cincinnati is a great school. Then when I landed and once I was there, I'm like, really? Oh, well, I'm already here. So that's that. So I got my undergrad and, it was good. All of that was amazing. Then I got married. And again, it was one of those things where, oh, your sister has to get married and she's younger than I am. So it was just one of those cultural things where now you have to get married before her. And I'm like, I still am not ready to get married. What am I going to do? And, it was just one of those things. I ended up meeting my husband. We were dating, but at the time we were dating, but long story short, it didn't end up working out. He was 15 years older than me. He was not Indian. I was in a complete rebel phase of my life. And I'm just like, So all of these things were happening. And then I ended up graduating with nutrition science, but I didn't find that intriguing. And I'm like, okay, so what do I do with my life now? Something has to be challenging and something has to be, and I was married and in North Dakota at the time. So I was just like, well, there's nothing really happening here other than minus 60 degree wind chill. So let me just make the most out of that. And so I decided to study, counseling. And that's where my mental health journey started. And one of the things our programs expected was if you're going to be on someone else's couch, it's really important that you be on someone's couch to know, what that experience is like. And I was like, nothing is wrong with me. What do you mean? And until then, like I told you, all the stuff had fallen apart, but yet I was so in denial. And I'm like, no, nothing is wrong.
Like most people.
Exactly. So, I ended up going to a therapist and it was one of the most amazing experiences I had. And it completely turned the trajectory of my life. I ended up studying mental health because I was like, okay, I don't like, the nutrition science thing was just not challenging. People come, you write their diets, but then after a few days or weeks, whatever, they stop doing whatever they are doing. So I was more interested in behavior because that's what my mother did. She went to a dietitian, she came back, and then she had all the weight back. And that's what people do. So I was like, yeah, something is not right. I need to know what and why people make the choices that they do, why people change, and why people have certain behaviors the way they do. So I went into counseling because I was like, there's not much going on. I'm married here. My husband used to teach entrepreneurship. So I was like, okay, let me just, study mental health, worst thing that could happen. And then here I am 12 years later.
Well, that was
I,
a short story.
Yeah, well, it gets pretty intense, some parts of it, but there were
I
valleys
believe
and
it.
mountains, lots of them.
I
But
believe
I
it.
wouldn't be who I am if it wasn't for all of those experiences and the way I see life now.
I believe it.
I'm curious about one aspect. It sounded like you almost had the American culture when you were in India, because it felt like your parents were pushing marriage to you before you came to the United States. And in your head, you're like, no, I don't want to be married yet. Were you a rebel in that sense?
I was
In
always the
the
black sheep.
Okay, so most of the people, most people at that age, women, okay, they're fun to get
Back
married.
in our generation, most of the people,
Okay,
yes, they got or married very early on in their
Mhm.
early 20s.
so
And
you're
then,
talking early '90s, mid '90s type thing.
yes. So not
Also,
the generation before Gen Z. So I just turned 40 last year. And that's one of the
okay.
reasons why I launched my podcast, because I'm very cool. Since my therapy life and my late 30s, I was very always vision and goal oriented. I'm like, I'm very big on setting goals, setting a vision, because I feel that if you don't know where you're going, you never end up anywhere. You just, you're just floating through life. And to me, I don't expect all my goals to come true. It's like I was reading this really cool article somewhere or in a book where companies like Google or even like huge corporations, they make and set all these goals and expect that 40% of their goals are going to not come true and they're going to end up in failures. But the 60 to 80% that they do come and make happen, they end up in products like Google Photos, Gmail, all these really big things. So I just personally for my life, I just feel like every decade I start with 10-year goals, and then, I break them down into smaller goals per year, and some happen, some don't, and then some teach me lessons. So earlier in my life, it was an expectation that yes, you get married and yes, you do all those things, but for my life, I just wasn't ready for it, because I was like, I want more out of my life. I want to do more. And my mother had taught us that. Her life was one of those people where, it was very patriarchal kind of culture in her generation. And then she had always raised us to be educated, to do something, to be independent, to be feminist, and to have your voice heard.
I like how you broke down the goals, because I think that's so important. It's what I hear from a lot of people out there is you have to break them down into like bite-sized
Absolutely.
pieces, right?
Absolutely.
Because if you
Absolutely.
looked at your 10-year plan and said like, how am I going to do this? You're
That's
going to be
too
like,
much. Yep.
screw it. I can't do
Yeah.
that because it's too much. But I like how you broke it down. I was like, okay, 10 years, 5 years, 1 year each. Like, what do I
Absolutely.
need
And
to
for
do?
my patients, that's something that I teach, because, I am not a believer of resolution, because again, the whole behavior part comes in where
Mhm.
people make resolutions, but they only last till Valentine's Day. Like Paul and
Sure.
I were
Yeah.
joking about it.
I think
Like,
it's only February 8th is like
yeah,
the
you start
stat.
all gung ho and excited in January. Come Valentine's Day, half the things are out the window, and then you're like, oh, I can't wait for next December for this
Yeah.
year to be over. And you're like, what? We just started. So for my patients, even because I do a lot of wellness and career counseling and vocational counseling and stuff too. And for me, I think it's just important that it's like we set 3 months goal, we set 6 months goal, we set year goal, because if you can set measurable outcomes or goals or set measurable goals, then you're more likely to attain it in terms of habit setting. Because it's like, if you want to instill something in your brain and grow the neural networks and make change and make behavioral changes, you have to make small attainable goals and be rewarded and feel rewarded for it. And you have to have a very strong why you are wanting to have those goals. If you don't have all those things in place, then it just becomes one of those things like, you know what, next year or next time. And yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes you got to ask yourself those tough questions to get to the why. Because a lot of people give
Absolutely.
you this surface level, well, this is
No.
why I want it. No,
Yep.
no, no, no. Why do you want
Why?
that? And there's
Yes.
something underneath that and something
Absolutely.
underneath
And
that.
that
So,
that something underneath that has to be really, really something that has to be like identity change and not a state change. Because when we look at, like, for example, happiness, like if something that you want brings you happiness, but if something else that happens that you don't like, then it brings you sadness. If you live in the state kind of change or state living, then your way of life is very up and down, which normally it is too. But if you really truly want to change, I think it's really important, and truly want your identity to change. It's because a lot of people, and I have done this work for a long time on myself as a personal experiment, and thus I speak like this now. But the people that come to me first, they come to me in crisis, like, hey, everything is falling apart, because like I said, I specialize in depression, anxiety, trauma. People don't think about these things as prevention. They think about it when it happens, a worst case scenario, and then they start looking at these things.
Sure.
I did that for a lot of my life, but now I'm like, nah, you know what, I know better.
Yeah.
So let me put you on the spot a little bit. What is your 1-year goal, 5-year goal, 10-year goal?
Oh wow, good one. So this was my first year since this decade started, because I turned 40 last Christmas. So we're talking, it's coming up. My goal was to. So I want to. The goal wasn't to really. I wanted to start my speaking career. I had spoken before, like I used to do trainings and stuff. In terms of my non-for-profit world and the career part of my life, when I did have that, I did that and I loved it. But I wanted to be on a TEDx. At this point, I want to be a TEDx speaker, and I want to have a bestseller book at one point. And then at my fifth, like in 10 years, I want to be in a place in my life where I'm financially free, but financially free in terms of, I can work wherever. I love what I do right now anyways. And I think that's one of the reasons why I started the podcast. I want to keep my patient life 40%, because I love waking up to, the private practice of my life, but I don't see myself doing that 100% of the time. I feel like I need to inspire a lot of people than just the ones that, come knocking at my door, and the whole jurisdiction of the whole licensing and stuff. So I like that, but I want to keep that 40%. And then the other 60%, I want to be able to make an impact digitally. So, maybe do coaching and wellness and that kind of stuff. And in 10 years, I see myself at least. And this is a huge dream, but I'm all about, dream big, go big or go home. And to me, because of the stigma associated with mental health, I one day want to have like a trauma recovery center where, or I don't know right now, but it's just sort of still incoming or still becoming. It's like a very interdisciplinary team where there would be, not just therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, acupuncturists, all these different healers and all these different people in place. Because to me, in terms of healing from trauma, it's not just, one thing doesn't work for everybody. Different people's experience look different. And I want them to be able to, like, just like there would be LA Fitness, there would be like this med spa, this treatment center where people just come and check in for 2 months or a month or something, and they get all kinds of clinicians or coaches or all kinds of experts in their fields, and do them whenever they're ready, and just heal and have the best experience and the best version of themselves when they get out of that place. So
Ready to check in already. When is
yeah.
it being built? When is it being built out? Yeah.
You
Better
too,
than Club
Miguel
Med.
Paul. If you're interested, I would love to have people, because I just feel like I want to be able to make an impact in people's lives, but I also want it to be something that's like, when it comes to mental health, there's so much stigma, so people are just like, I don't know. But I wanted in 10 years, I want to be able to leave a dent in the stigma associated with mental health through my work, that people are just look at it like, I'm going to a chiropractor, so what?
Sure.
Some people do already, but most people don't. And I just think that that's unfortunate, especially when they're suffering from PTSD and hardcore traumatic things.
You're right. And Paul and I have talked about that before, that there is a stigma around, therapy and even coaching.
Yeah.
So you seem like you're kind of in both worlds.
Oh, absolutely.
And I know we get asked this question a lot, is like, what's the difference between therapy and coaching? So what is your take on that, and what the difference is between those two worlds?
Thank you for asking that question, because that's really important. When I started my work, or when I started my private practice, and when it came to marketing it, I was all about, therapy, obviously because of what I do. But then I noticed that because of the stigma associated with it, I would also put life coach or wellness coach, and that I'm the same person doing the same thing, and I know that there is a distinction, because there's this whole certification and all the stuff that coaches go through. I get that. There's a body for a reason, so that, people are not just doing more harm to others than good. But I also think because of the stigma, when I marketed myself as wellness coach, I was more able to work with people who were high functioning but looking to just get to the next step, but weren't feeling so clinical.
Yeah.
Unfortunate part with the whole insurance and the therapy experience and the coaching stuff, it's like you don't get reimbursed for coaching, you get reimbursed for therapy. And you don't get reimbursed for just therapy, you get reimbursed because you have depression or mild depression
Yeah.
when it comes to therapy. So a lot of times, and that's the part that I don't like, because I just feel like it's such a game almost. And it's not a game, but it's sad that mental health in the insurance world or in the lobbying world or in the political world is not taken seriously.
Mhm.
People have real life issues. If those issues were addressed, they would be so much more efficient, so much more productive, and so much better in terms of their creativity, in terms of what they gave to the workplaces that they were working at. So I just feel sad that it's not there yet, and that's the reason why to me the line is blurred. But therapy in my world, because of what I do, is more clinical. And even with clinical, it's like it depends on the person you go to. So when you talk to me, I have a very different experience, and my perception and beliefs about therapy and coaching might look very different from somebody else.
Sure.
who might do exactly what I do in terms of the treatment modalities, but might not believe in marketing themselves as a coach. Well, different people have, I don't know, to each its own, I guess. So to me, I'm more open. As long as people are seeking the help and getting to be the better version of themselves and getting some kind of help, and if coming to me seems like coaching or therapy, and if that normalizes that experience for them, I'm okay with that.
Sure.
I think we're trending in the right direction on that, though. I think the stigma is slowly going away.
Yeah.
And I know we spoke about this yesterday on your podcast. We talked about we rag on the younger generations for many, many things. But one of the things that I do appreciate about the younger generations, they're more open to share their feelings.
Yeah.
So they're more open for coaching and therapy. So I think in that sense, we're going the right way. And in my own life, when I talk with people and they say they have a life coach, career coach, whatever, I think they got a leg up. I don't think it as a negative. I actually think it's a positive. Now that I'm a coach, obviously I'm biased on that, but I truly in my heart feel when somebody says they have a coach, and it's not me, whatever, to teach their own, but I feel like, hey, you know what? They're smart. They're going after it.
And it's so true. And, some of the organized, like one of my best friends, she is a employee assistance program wellness coach at J&J. And we have this running joke because aren't I? She's also a trauma therapist, but in her J&J world, she's a wellness coach. And she also has a private practice, and we do similar things and treat similar people. And she lives in Florida, and we were talking about this. And she's like, it's so amazing to see at J&J, the culture is that people walk around with their journals, and everybody has a therapist, and everybody asks everybody like, hey, like when they look at you, if you almost don't have a therapist, they look at you strange if you don't have a therapist. And to me, that's sexy. It's like everybody's going to a therapist, they're getting their head straight, dealing with their issues, and thus J&J is the brand that it is. If that's the culture, and that's the kind of people that they appoint, and that's the kind of culture that they have in that organization, I really admire that.
And it is something just to have that sounding board, because
Yes.
no matter how many books you read, no matter how many tools you have, I know Paul and I talk about this, like I have to remind myself sometimes, I'm like, oh wait, I know how to get out of this. But sometimes it's nice to have that other person as a sounding board and be like, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. The funny thing is people that are coaches or have had coaches or therapists before, you almost laugh when you hear the solution, right? It's like, oh yeah, you're right. That's what I'm doing. I was just blocked.
No, it's so true, because even for us as therapists, we have a therapist, because sometimes when we're in it, we can't see the blind spots that the other person as our mentor can see and show us that we don't realize and we feel stuck with. So to me, in my effort to normalize this entire experience, it's just that, it don't come to me when you're in crisis, come to me as a tune-up. It's like once it doesn't have to be a lifelong thing. You can go see it. There are patients that I see, and for me, just the way I work, I'm very solution focused, and I'm very to the point. Even with my trauma people, I specialize in a thing called EMDR, and it's a treatment modality. Very intense, but at some point, so anyways, so with my trauma people, because there's so much to it and I get so excited and I'll go off.
I was curious to hear an explanation. How to say, never mind.
It's a good 10-minute tangent that I might have gotten into. But, even with that, I just find it so imperative to work with my trauma people, and they've been through talk therapy before. Talk therapy most of the time doesn't work with trauma, because there are certain things that, in terms of certain major events that happen, that your subconscious carries, your body carries. So you've talked about it enough in your head with your people that talking about it doesn't take care of it. So to me, I'm just very okay, let's figure out what you want to resolve. Let's figure out what you want to process, and then process it, and out you go. So same thing with the coaching, which is where I was trying to get to. It's like sometimes you can just go to a coach or go to a therapist for a couple of sessions, and that's that. And then if there's something else comes up, you know who to go to. I mean, that's what we do. That's what I do as a therapist. Even that I have something come up in my life, I go and make an appointment, I clear it out. So I'm not bringing all of that in with my patients if there are some certain things that were to come up in my life. I just think it's something that you just go talk it out.
Do you feel that a lot of the people know the answers and they just don't want to go there, and you gotta have to bring it out of them? Or do you feel like you're giving advice?
No. So I'm not Dr. Phil. Therapy is not about giving advice. Therapy is absolutely not about telling people what to do, because again, your life and your life experience is only yours. I help people based on the treatment goals. So hypothetically, if a couple came to me and they're like, we would like to work with you. And I'm like, okay, if I ask them first, it's like, do you want to stay married? Do you want to get divorced? Do you want me to mediate? What is the role you want me to play? Because it's not my job to say, oh, make this marriage work, when it is absolutely not going to work for them. Same thing. If you come to me for individual counseling, and if you say, hey, I would like to get better about certain things, and then we dig deeper into, the layers of things subconsciously in terms of some certain beliefs that like we were talking about self-limiting beliefs and stuff yesterday, Paul, where, we dig deeper into where some of those things started for them in the first place. And my job is to just help you get unstuck or feel less overwhelmed or whatever it is that you were coming to me for. So I don't tell you what to do. Absolutely not. And also one of the things that people have therapy is misconstrued as, oh, you're just paying someone to talk to. Well, there is so much research in, the therapeutic alliance. And that's why they say you have to find a therapist that is a right fit for you. 50% of the studies show that people have had 2 therapists before they find a third one, and 40% of the people have had 3 therapists before they find the fourth one. So it's really important, in order for healing, in order for work to get done, you have to be in tune and in connection with your therapist, because otherwise it wouldn't work, like you were saying yesterday with your coaching.
Yeah. And I think that's important. Yeah. On the coaching side too, like finding that right person that's going to mesh with you, that you're going to resonate with. And I know Paul and I, we've referred clients to each other that we were like, hey, we're not a good fit.
Right.
Hey, look, I got someone that I believe would be a good fit for you.
Absolutely.
And
yes.
That's
all
about
the exact same thing. We do the exact same thing. When people call us, they've called 10 other therapists, and they're literally therapist shopping. And I do a 15-minute free phone consult just to make sure that we're the right fit before I have them walk in for their first interview. Because I don't want to feel stuck, and every appointment, I don't want to be like, oh, I don't want to go to the session. Imagine if your therapist did that. And
because you would pick up on it. You would pick up on it subconsciously, absolutely. Whether or not you were aware of it. You'd be like, something's off every time I show up.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I feel like I had a coach that was that way when I had a session with them. Like, oh man, wow, this is too high energy. I don't know if I can handle this for another hour.
Exactly. And then in our world, it's like there are certain, therapeutic things that happen that are beyond the scope of my expertise. Like I know what I am, and what I have done, and what I have been doing for 10 years now. Mental health is mental health, but not everybody can do everything, and they would be doing people a disservice if they did that. And that's exactly one of the reasons why, if I always gauge and assess when people come in my door, as in, hey, what are you coming in with? What do you need help with? Am I the right person who knows what I'm doing in terms of helping you? Or have I dealt with this before? Or, some of those things, because there are certain, like, I don't deal with personality disorders. I'm not good at that. I'm not even going to act like I am. I'm not good at, certain working with people who have bipolar. I'm not good at working with people who have other issues. So there are certain things that I just wouldn't accept, because then
Those
I
all
would
sound
be
like
doing them
limiting
more
beliefs you're
harm.
putting on yourself, but just
It's not limiting beliefs. I just know that, I'd rather see someone who was PTSD, and that's it. I
I'm
am
just
ready to
poking
go
the
to
bear.
work.
I'm just poking
That's free advice from a life coach, Justin Atherton.
I'll make an appointment after. We'll do a phone
There you
consult.
go. There you go.
I'm sorry, peak performance consultant. I
There you go.
apologize.
It's all good.
Oh man.
We all craft our own verbiage. But Gunjani, what is like the major project that you're working on right now? Like, what is the thing that you're passionate about at the moment? I mean, you're passionate about everything. I can tell.
Right. Well, no.
What is that major project right now that you're focused on?
So that's the funny thing. When you were talking about, when we just started this, my podcast I just launched on November 10th, and that's where that's my major like little baby that I'm like nurturing right now. And that's one of the reasons why I asked. I was like, "What was your journey like?" Because like I was telling you in terms of gender, I'm like, all this stuff that I'm doing learn, like, and all the things that I'm doing related to it, and how I see it, coming to fruition, and all those things. So the podcast is that project right now till it's up and running. And and because I think I've said this on myself, where I'm just like, hey, I don't want to be one of those 10 episode podcasts where I'm like, done, I'm good to go, bye. So I wanted to keep going, and it's been an experience, and I'm having fun with it. So I guess that's my next step would be digital courses and stuff. But right now I'm just like, I need to start what I finish, because I have this ADD thing going on where I start and then I'm like, okay, on to the next. And
the name of your podcast?
Traumatic Transformations with
Okay.
Gunjani Patel.
And where can you see it or listen to it? Excuse me.
Any podcast where you, I'll send you guys the link. Any I'm on. I host through Lipson, so anywhere you get your podcast from, I'm everywhere.
Yes, because I'm going to listen to myself.
Yeah, and our own Paul, of course, is on yet another podcast. So like, and our viewers and listeners have to tune in to your show because they have to listen to Paul.
Paul, of course. Paul's show will be airing on January 5th.
There you go.
So yeah.
I like to give Paul, I like to give him some crap because he's on everybody's podcast, but he's put himself
free advertising, baby.
Paul is consistent.
But if he wasn't, I wouldn't have known. I was like, oh, this Paul. I just was about to interview him for my show. So hey, Paul is everybody.
Paul is super consistent when it comes to that. So I give him props for that as well. I give him a lot of props. So what is the best way, other than your podcast, what's the best way for people to reach out to you if they want to work with you?
So I am, I guess, just, I can be reached over email. So gpatel@gpatelcounseling.com. And then if you just Google my name, you'll find me everywhere because of my therapy and private practice world. If you Google my name, I show up on Psychology Today, all these subscription services that I have. Sure. Unfortunately, in terms of my therapy world, I can only work with people in the states of California and Florida, because those are the states I'm licensed in. But in terms of the coaching world, I guess I'm open to working with anybody.
Or the world, right? You're open to the world.
Right. Because I guess those jurisdictions don't apply to coaching, which is great.
Well, awesome. Well, all of your information will be down in the show notes. And, we like to ask our guests when they come on the show with the title of our podcast in mind, Actions and Limits. What would you say is one action that people out there can take that would really make a difference in their lives?
Consistency. One of the biggest things that I've learned is like we were talking earlier, we show up so excited in January, and then at the end, any project or anything if you want to be successful at, one of my favorite quotes is from the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, where he says, if you want to become an expert at something, whatever it might be, you have to put in 10,000 hours at that. So
Sure.
you cannot put in 10,000 hours if you're not consistent with things. So I'm really big on, no matter what you start, if you want something to change in your life and whatever it may be, one of the biggest things to do, even on your bad days, even if it's just for a minute or two, or even if you are in your thought and acknowledging that, today I'm having a bad day. I can't take care of what I promised myself that I can, but tomorrow I'm going to definitely give it a shot. Even if it stays in your thought and your radar, we show up no matter what. So I think consistency is big, and I'm very big on that.
I like that. I like the consistency, and like I said, Paul's very consistent with hopping on people's podcasts. So Paul's
Thank
got
you,
the
Justin.
consistency
He's the reason
down.
I'm here. So he's consistent.
He's definitely consistent. So the other side of that are these self-imposed limits that we put on ourselves. What have you seen, which is the major limit out there that people put on themselves that they need to get rid of immediately?
Oh, that's a hard one because I can tell you what limits I put on myself, but what are the and actually in terms of people, I think we put those limits because of our limiting beliefs that we acquire through life, and we end up believing that they are true. And at some point, if they are not letting us be the best version of ourselves, then we need to look at what beliefs that we acquired in our childhood that served a purpose at some point are now holding us back. Because, some things work when we're 16, but after a while, those things stop working. And then we find ourselves in this gridlock and in this hamster wheel where we get so frustrated ourselves because we don't think about, hey, if I keep doing the same things over and over, that's the definition for insanity. So I think that's the big thing. That's one of the reasons why people have such a hard time changing, is because, we stay stuck in what we used to believe in and where we acquired those beliefs. So the limitation is us. The limitation is our mind. We can be anything we want to be if we so choose to.
Yeah.
Happiness is not a choice. Suffering is. So absolutely.
Ooh, that's an interesting thought, that happiness is not a choice, but suffering.
Some people it's not. Some people want
Say that again. I'm sorry, I missed that.
I'm a true believer of happiness is not a choice. Suffering is. Happiness is not a choice for people who are deeply clinically depressed and their brain chemicals are not firing certain ways that they want them to be fired. They don't want to be unhappy. They just don't know how else to switch all that around, and that's one of the reasons why we come in place. But it's like for some people they want to be happy but they can't be. So
wow, no, super interesting. And Gunjani, thank you so much for all of your insight and sharing your story with us. There was a lot of information to soak in, and I think our audience got a lot of value out of that. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on our show.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, guys. Paul, thank you for this opportunity. And we'll have to thank Rish for doing this. So he was the one who recommended you guys to me. So I'm really happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Rish Dads and Deadlifts.
Yeah.
Yes days.
Paul has been there too, right, Paul?
That's that. And Justin has too.
I was on the show as well. Yeah, Rish is awesome. So. Gunjani had a lot of information to share with us. I'm certain that our viewers and listeners out there got some value out of that. I think we could have talked to her for a long time, or let her talk to us for a long time. She had a lot of information to share with us. What was your biggest takeaway from what she shared?
Her energy is contagious, and just with talking with her, put me in a happier mood, because she was going 90 miles a minute, so I wanted to catch up and go with her. You know what I mean? So, but she's very, very knowledgeable in her field of work. Like you said, our listeners learned a lot from what she talks about, and a lot of things that we talk about, maybe not so much in the scientific way that she does. I know you do a little bit more than I do, Justin, on the scientific end of it. Very fascinating. We could have talked to her for 3 hours nonstop.
Yeah. I think even off the air, we talked for a little while too, just kind of, going into some more details. But yeah, I think we could have, I want to bring her back on the show and maybe pick a different topic, and we can go from there, because it sounds like she's got a lot great information to share. So I was glad that, she came on the show to share with us, and glad that, our guest Rish is the one that, hooked us up so we can all get together and share more information for all our audiences. So that's how this podcast community works, right? Share guests, and Paul's a guest on every podcast out there. So it's
that's my goal.
Joe Rogan's your next stop, right?
That would be, that's that. If you talked about the 1, 5, my podcast guest goals, I think that would be my 10.
Is that it?
Yeah.
No, I like that. So
yeah.
So let's go ahead and wrap up the show with another segment of Ask Paul Anything. Pulled an interesting question out of here. I'm curious for your answer, but this question is from Brian in Arkansas, and he says, Paul, what kind of secret society would you like to start?
What kind of secret society would I like to start? The positive society, secret society. Everything's got, whatever the language that you say has to be positive. Can't be negative. You can't say anything negative in the society. It's all got to be positive. So you got to reword it in your head before you speak it out loud, so it's positive.
What if you had some criticism you wanted to share with someone in this secret society? Well,
that's the trick. You have to come up with a way to say it in a positive manner. Not going to be easy.
So if
it's not going to be easy.
You cooked me a steak that I thought was horrible, I'd have to say, Paul, I really like the effort that you put into cooking that steak.
Yes, but could you cook it a little bit less next time? I don't know.
Oh, that's a good one. So thank you for sending in your question. Continue to send your questions into the show at actionsandlimits@gmail.com to have your question featured on our segment, Ask Paul Anything. So another great guest, Paul. We're starting off the year great. Really excited to share with our audience all our great guests that we have coming on the show. So another great episode, man.
That's right. For Justin Atherton, this is Paul Fortune. We'll see you next week.
All right. See you next Monday. Thank you for listening to the show. Don't miss an episode. Click and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on your favorite podcast platform, and find us on Instagram and Facebook under Actions and Limits to stay updated on all our upcoming content. Continue to email the show at actionsandlimits@gmail.com for our segment Ask Paul Anything. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.